Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first session of 2023 from the Seminario, Espacio, Cultura y Turismo. Today, we have the presence of Lénia Marquez. She is Assistant Professor of Cultural Organization and Management at Erasmus University, Rotterdam, Netherlands. Her research focuses on the development of the cultural and creative industries and the relationships with other fields, such as tourism and events. Her interest is particularly in cities and the development of cultural and creative policies and the relationship of creativity and urban processes. Today, we're very happy to have you here, Lénia. So please, cameras and microphones are with you.
Okay, thank you so much, Driselda, and thank you for having invited me for this space. Hola a todos, a todas que están del otro lado. So also to the UNAM for providing the space and the technical support. So I'm very happy to be here, and I greet everybody that is on YouTube also or on Facebook. And I hope we will have some nice exchanges also. So as you can see from my background, we are also talking a lot about this project like that, cultsense. That's also one of the motives that Driselda invited me. So thank you so much for that. Maybe I will share my screen now. Prepare the presentation. Please, if you do have issues, just let us know. So the title of this presentation is Making Cultsense, Cultural Sensitivity in Cultural Tourism. So there's a lot of culture in there. And there's this idea of making cultsense, which is about we make sense out of things, out of events, out of life, out of experiences. But sometimes when we travel, we don't always make sense out of the cultures that we visit. So in the project, while brainstorming, we came up with this idea of making cultsense. So this is where the title comes from. And the reflection today will be on the project, but related very specifically to cultural tourism. So the idea of cultsense, which is sensitizing young travelers for local cultures, is a project, but the project came from this observation and also these exchanges about different phenomena in tourism, like growth in mobility. Of course, with the pandemic, growth stopped, but now we see a rise again in lots of different mobilities. And we also see a very big diversified audience, so visitors of the different interests, different perceptions. And this increase in diversification has also led to misunderstandings and very often tensions that we see on media, for example. Media are great putting up all these tensions between hosts and locals. Most of the times it goes okay. But we also know there's quite some stories, and once a destination starts to be quite popular among tourists, then the irritation levels of the locals also start going up. But of course, we are also locals in the place where we live, and many people are tourists, visitors also. So what is about these different roles and how can we make them come a bit closer? At the same time, besides these tensions, we also have debates on social, cultural sustainability. Of course, sustainability is a big topic in tourism also, and there are different types of different dimensions of sustainability, and most recently, it has been on the debates have been on social and cultural sustainability, and that makes special sense when we are thinking about cultural tourism. So these are some of the tensions. This is the red light district in Amsterdam. For some of you who have visited Amsterdam, this is part very often of the tours of where you have to go. And since a few years ago, there's several campaigns in the red light district where you can see here one of the windows. I did take a picture because there was nobody there, where it appeals, it addresses this respect for the sex worker. So this is also a form of understanding where you are and respecting human beings, basically. This is another example of these discussions. Again, we are giving examples that are quite extreme, where in a medieval village in Portugal called Óbidos, people a few years ago started to use the typical blue of the houses to write on the walls. And it has been a fight against this because everybody wants to put their landmark and say, I was here. But this is really not part of the heritage. Or is it, could we argue? I personally don't think so. Another form of tourism that we can also think about is war tourism, where there has also been quite some tensions. My colleague Siri Driselda has done this nice video, and she works a lot on war tourism. And there are also different people who visit these sites. In this case, you see Westerbork, which was a transportation camp, like a concentration camp during the Second World War. And you can see here that there's representing several people that were transported. But people visiting the site, they have different interests, they behave in different ways. And so all of these questions, they really, we started really thinking about what can we do? Is there anything as tourism academics, as tourism educators, can we give our contribution for the next generation? So part of the answer, we think, is based on developing these cultural sensitivity competences, and we hope they can contribute to mitigate these tensions that we're talking about, not just between visitors and locals, but also different stakeholders, potential audiences, so everybody that is involved. And with it, from the tourist side, we can think that there will be place for better quality tourism experiences. And this can also help the industry to provide these services more in-depth, probably more slower types of tourism, where people stay longer to appreciate the cultures that they visit. And with these kind of competences, there should be also place of a valorization of the local cultures and their heritage. So in this way, it would be a form of empowerment, if you will, where not only it's a form of value for the other who visits, but it's also a form of appreciation by the locals for their own culture. And they can even become visitors in their surroundings, because it's surprising sometimes that there are many different communities, and sometimes we don't know the communities that live just around the corner. So we can say that we would be tourists in our own city, which is a term that is now quite popular. So all of these reasons have led us to consider cultural sensitivity. And of course, a special place and a kind of crossroads is cultural tourism. So cultural sensitivity makes a lot of sense when we're talking about cultural tourism. And this is when culture meets tourism. I was hesitating if I should write culture or cultures. And it would make sense to be both. So here culture is the large term that we would embrace also different cultures. So it's the broader term. If we look into the concept of cultural tourism, we see that overall, in terms of estimation of what a cultural tourism, who the cultural tourism is, the UNWTO has estimated it's 37% of travelers, of tourists. There's discussions about the number, but this would include both the culture as a main driver, as a main motivation to travel, but also culture as a side effect, which means that people would travel for other reasons. Think of business tourism, and then they would do some culture. They would go to visit a monument, or they do some gastronomic experience. With its evolution, cultural tourism became this large concept, embracing more and more things, different niches, and of course, it has changed over time. So it's no longer the same definition that we use. So the UNWTO has also changed its approach to cultural tourism, and now we can see they define it in the way that you can see on the slides as a type of tourism activity in which the visitor's essential motivation is to learn, discover, experience, and consume the tangible and intangible cultural attractions, products in a tourism destination. So we have here different levels from learning to experience. And we can see here this presence of the motivation. And they move on to embrace a lot of different types of culture, they specify it as arts, architecture, literature, music, but also besides these, let's say, creative expressions, cultural expressions, also lifestyles, value systems, beliefs, and traditions, which connects very well, of course, to the concept of culture as also seen by international bodies like the UNESCO. So Richards, in his book Rethinking Cultural Tourism, refers to 6 differences in 6 shifts, let's say, or 6 points in this definition that differ from the previous definitions. So here we can see a shift from tangible to intangible. So we're talking more about intangible heritage, considering different types of intangible heritage. We also see a shift from the pure folklore to something that is a bit more complex, like lifestyles, value systems, beliefs, and traditions. And it's not just a product, it becomes much more an experience with these dimensions of learning, discovering. So consumption goes in different levels. The fourth element that there is a bit different from the previous definitions and previous considerations relates to the emphasis on different elements of culture. So now we talk about these cultural expressions, but also the more intangible, local, how people live, and also their beliefs and their emotional, their moral compasses. Another interesting point is that the emotional features are now added to the definition. So there is also an affective dimension in this definition. So it's no longer just an exchange or something that we just consume, but there is a relationship and there is an emotional investment in this idea of cultural tourism. And finally, we didn't mention it, there are specific niches addressed in this definition. So with this approach, which has become much more complex and much more complete also at the same time, I would also like to call your attention to some considerations, because when we talk about heritage, when we talk about tradition, sometimes we need to think about how do we relate to heritage and tradition? How do we relate to our own heritage and to our own traditions, but also to the heritage and traditions of other people, of the places that we visit? So it is complex, and of course we need to try to understand and respect. Local cultures have different elements in terms of past, present, and future. So heritage also is built on past. There's also traditions related to this heritage. Think of intangible heritage. And Mexico is also very rich in all these tangible and intangible heritages. You have several of these traditions and monuments on the list of UNESCO, for example. So we do need to look at the past to understand the present and to see how the present is what we operate, who we are, and our identity. But we also need to look at the future. We can talk about future heritage. That's one thing. And what future heritage do we want? But also, we also need to be a bit critical, because when we talk about heritage and preserving heritage, there's also this recognition of tradition. We are also fixing tradition and heritage and wanting it to stop in time and keeping it. And on the other side, we should also allow for some flexibility, and especially for intangible heritage. There is a call for it to be quite lived by the communities where they operate. So we need to also consider that heritage, and also intangible heritage, is part of a past narrative that needs to sometimes be reinvented and reframed for the future. And I would risk to say not all traditions are good from the local level, from the local communities. At some point, there are tensions and traditions change. And we can see which traditions are kept and how they are kept, or how they are made live, because it might not be exactly as it was 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, but maybe it can live in a different way. to respond to this idea of present and future. So I think this is quite an important point to be made. So cultural sensitivity relates to understanding these local cultures. It relates to having a certain awareness and this idea of respect for the other and where they live and how they live. So cultural sensitivity has been, and we can trace it in terms of tourism, to some ideas like responsible tourism or mindful tourism, and of course, sustainable tourism, and more recently, regenerative tourism. I don't know if it's something in Mexico, but in Europe, regenerative tourism is now a big trend, including for culture. So not only. So it's one of the trends we see here. And there have been also declarations in the early 2000s with the Cape Town Declaration of Responsible Tourism, also the revised Global Code of Ethics for Tourism of the UN and the WTO. And the project that has been developing a lot, which is Arctizen. It relates to indigenous communities in the Arctic. And they have developed many tools, online courses. And one of the tools they have developed is the future that we want. So they design these ethical guidelines to show people how the local community, in this case, the Sami, would like to have visitors and how they see visitors in their communities. So for some researchers, we can say that cultural sensitivity is not something that is finally achieved. It's not a state. It's not something you can say, oh, I am now culturally sensitive and that's it. It's something that is continuous and that you move, you exercise, and that is why we can think of it as a becoming. You are always becoming. It's always a changing process. So the idea of cultural sensitivity is to look into creating awareness for local cultures. And we can do that with tourism experiences. So through travel, through visiting unfamiliar places. And when I say unfamiliar, is not necessarily the exotic. It can be, like I said, just around the corner. And trying to make people understand better habits, rituals, where lifestyles come from, what are the beliefs of these local communities. So we can think of cultural sensitivity as a disposition that can be enhanced. So through self-reflection, we can understand our own cultural norms and values. And then we can also have more empathy and have a better connection and understanding of who we visit. The main point in all of this is, of course, being open to the other, open to other things. And this is how we have tried to connect these different things in cultural sensitivity. So in order to try to understand cultural sensitivity in travel and different dimensions, we have put together a methodology. So we are still collecting data. And this is a survey, but it's also, we have different tools, focus groups, etc., which you are most welcome to contact us if you want to also be part of it. And we see cultural sensitivity in travel with, let's say, 3 big dimensions that we took also from other studies, other literature. Intercultural competence is one of them. So how do intercultural competence in tourism, which dimensions it has, from the cognitive to the affective, then cosmopolitanism. So this idea that we are traveling and we know other people, communities are traveling, there's a lot of mobility. This idea sometimes of the citizen of the world. And of course, like we mentioned before, sustainability, because we also need to be respectful of the places we visit, of where we live, and think of it in a sustainable way, also social and cultural sustainability, not just environmental or economic. So with these 3 big, let's say, themes, we try to understand how cultural sensitivity works and what's the panorama. And with this, this is the basis of our project, and it's, as I said, cultsense is the project. And we have aimed at, the project is still going, and we hope to continue it in some way, that we are developing tools for sensitizing young travelers, exactly within this idea that young travelers, they are motivated a lot by culture, and they are very curious. They want to know more. They want to experience. And they are also the professionals of tomorrow. So we should also work with the future professionals to understand how we can help the next generations to become better professionals, and also better locals and better tourists, so that we contribute to a dialogue. And travel can be that platform for dialogue. Travel is a platform for exchange, and we can try to find bridges where people come together and they discuss, even if they don't agree. They don't have to agree. It's about respect. So in this project, we are with 5 universities from different countries. You have the list here. And we are also having associate partners, the Wise Travel Confederation, so who works with youth travel, and Atlas, who works also a lot with education and universities. So we create some tools also in terms of education. I will show you a few. And we also want not just the students, but also ourselves, the teaching academics, thinking about these topics. Our project focuses on tourism, leisure, and culture, but can be also adapted. The tools can be adapted to other courses like business administration or healthcare. So some of the tools that we have been developing relate to, for example, this methodological approach, the survey, but also videos. You can follow us on YouTube, now doing a little bit of advertisement. Our students and us together, you'll see there's many videos, many talks, and we hope to keep it going. It works really well with the students, I have to say. So it's something that we would like to keep going. And we have case studies, learning modules, pedagogical toolkit, and we are doing some publications and media content. The materials are co-created with students. So students participate in different ways. And we try as much as possible to have a bottom-up approach, see also what is important and how can we work with young people. And we try to focus on different types of also technology. In a few days, so you are the first ones to see this. In a few days, we will launch our cultsense pedagogical toolkit, which is also, it's a joint effort of many people. And we coordinated with Silvia Aulet and Mariana Oliveira. And the design is by Fernanda Rodriguez. And so here we concentrate a lot of tools that people can use in their teaching, but there's also reflection tools. And there's also a reflection on cultural sensitivity in tourism and what are local cultures. So stay tuned. This will be out very soon. And these are some of the examples on social media publications. Here are some of the videos that you can see. Another tool that we did, we have 5 learning modules. And these 5 learning modules, as you can see, they are very much related to intangible forms of heritage. Not only, but mainly. So you have gastronomy, taste of cultures. So this is, we can even consider it either part of cultural tourism or maybe part of a type of tourism on its own. I don't think that's the main debate to have, but it is important. It's very important in many communities. And it's a way of understanding not just the food, but also the landscape, the relationships. And I mean, Mexico has wonderful food, I understand, and very spicy. So it's quite strong in its relationship to food. It's important. And it's not just about the food. It's about the landscape, and especially it's about the people who you eat with. And then we have spirituality, which also relates to forms of cultural tourism, because there's also this part of beliefs. There's a lot of monuments that are religious, related to religious heritage, churches, temples. So there are many forms around the world of spirituality, and we try also to address that. Another one which really focus on the emotional, and when I say emotional, more maybe affective. So in terms of effect in tourism, and how to address these different emotions that the tourism experience can have, and also our relationship to different forms of culture and heritage. And the other one, living like a local, is really trying to understand this idea of how do we get to understand what the locals do, how do we engage with them, which is also the focus of module number 5, where we also talk about the cultural roots, which are also very important in understanding this local culture. So these modules, part of them is also, and these themes, they're also in our case studies. It's also, it's an ebook, it's free, it's open access for anybody to use, to read. It's very European, I have to say, because this is a European project and we started like that. So we do know, we understand it's it has its limitations, and we do hope that maybe some colleagues from other places, and I'm looking at Driselda because she's on my screen, but it can be in many other places. We hope to develop this also to embrace other perspectives in the world. We know there's more than just Europe. We do realize that. So again, it's a little bit like with the learning modules. It's these case studies, for example, in the first part, they relate to Auschwitz and to the red light district, especially thinking of women in the red light district. Then this, again, the idea of the tastes, the gastronomic traditions. Here we have a case on the sarrabulho in Minho, which is a very typical dish, and also the relationship and the comparison between the perception of Catalan gastronomy with international visitors. These were students. Spirituality, and we have a case on the sauna, the Finnish sauna. This is an historical picture, and a case of spirituality, in this case related to religious heritage in Catalonia. And the last one, we have Erasmus mobilities. So there are other forms of student mobilities, of course, and that is a big part because students, when they go and live abroad, they're still visitors. They're a very special type of visitor, and I use special in the very positive sense. Maybe because I was one, I am very positive about student mobility. And these can also be ambassadors for the local cultures. And they are also very often cultural tourists. They are interested in different forms, tangible and especially intangible forms of culture. And the last case study that we have is on Via Transilvanica, so which is in Transylvania in Romania. So these are part of our case studies. And we have been developing and thinking of some tools. For example, this is a framework based on the cultural theory by Van Heusden. And there are 4 dimensions of how to make meaning with local cultures. And these 4 dimensions can be also applied to tourism. In this case, it's education, but we can think of tourism professionals trying to get them to perceive, to imagine, conceptualize, and also analyze. So there's a kind of involvement here also at a cognitive level, not just perceiving, but really also different skills between imagination and analyzing. And of course, creative tourism is one of the forms where this is very visible, and cultural sensitivity, especially with intangible and local cultures, can come to life with the experience in the middle and working with creativity, forms of learning in places, understanding places better, and also always looking at people, the people who are there, the locals, and relationships with different communities and also with the visitors. And to finish, I would invite you at the same time a little bit more advert for our 3rd webinar, which is on the 15th of March, where we will discuss research tools and cultural awareness. So this is focused on how to research cultural awareness. And we have some guests, it's as you can see. and also invite you for the conference we are organizing, which is exactly on bridging cultures through travel. Excuse me. And this is the idea that I would like to end my presentation with, is that culture, different forms of culture can be a great platform, or better, travel can be a great platform for exchange of cultures, for bridging cultures, to bring the dialogue and to try to contribute to better relationships between people, locals, visitors, different stakeholders, and hopefully contribute to a bit more of a peaceful world where we can disagree and still be friends. So thank you. And yeah, you can also follow us in our channels.
Thank you so much, Lénia. It was really interesting. Thank you for your time and for accepting the invitation. I have a few questions. Do you know if there is any studies that have already tested if this material have a behavioral change in young people? Like if a young traveler reads this World Tourist Ethic document, does it change his mind, the way traveling? Or I don't know, I guess it does, but do you know about any article or any publication that has already tested, like in maybe experimental way or something?
That's a great question. I don't know any studies, so if anybody finds them, please let me know. That would be great. And I mean, that is part of the challenge that we are also trying to address, because of course, when this project is funded by the Erasmus Plus agency, so basically the European Commission, and of course, as many funded projects, you need to report on your impact. And it's extremely difficult, and we knew since the beginning, it's very difficult because some of the things, and as an educator, you will also know that some of the things we do today, they have different kinds of effect much later on. And it's not very easy to know because it's also a build-up. So in terms of, for example, the UN WTO Code of Ethics, I don't know any of those tools. I really don't know of any study. I don't think there is. And what we are trying to do in our project is some of these smaller tools, so not necessarily the global code of ethics, but the tools that we are developing, we're trying to test that. Of course, it's a short frame. The project is 3 years. So we have, for example, a tool where we measure before and after, like a bit of an experiment. We also run, in fact, I just got the results. My colleague, Mihai Tishendilian, I never know how to say his name. Sorry, Mihai. He has been also analyzing the data that we got, and it's interesting to see that people who know about this project and are somehow involved, they seem to be more aware. And the feedback we've been getting is that, for example, with videos, when students have to do something with video or think about themselves even, and about this cultural awareness, what is important for them, what is important for visitors, they do say, it changed my perspective. So I think that will be a challenge that also Arctizen, the other project in the Arctic, is doing. But maybe UNWTO has done something somewhere.
Thank you. I will search for it. Also, I was reading your article about this kind of attractive title, the Why is Tourist Season? If we can not shoot at them or something like that. It's quite interesting because sometimes we make the critic about tourists, about the disadvantage that tourists make to cities when it's over tourism and some cases like that. But at the end, we are all tourists, right? Like we all travel to somewhere to meet someone or to do something. And we also are locals, as you said. So it's interesting to change the perspective and just to get this equilibrium. I was wondering also, when you talk about young people, it's just university students or are just younger, or what's the age limit?
Yeah, sorry, maybe it was not. So our project, the idea is to try to work with young people, but we did need to narrow it down. So we do work with students, higher education. So it's higher education students. And we are hoping to get to more people, but the first, let's say, target audience of the project is higher education students. Yes, we still have the dream that we will even work with kids from kindergarten, because the earlier you start to think about these things, the better, so that they can really build it in. And it's a little bit like what we do in culture, right? You get them to museums to understand, to understand also where they live and etc. So we have a dream.
Yeah, that will be really interesting. Also, the Latin American case, I was thinking about a place where we have been doing field work here in Mexico about Day of the Dead. But it's really interesting because it's not a touristic place, but only in the Day of the Dead festivities, a lot of people from all over the world came to that place. So it's really interesting how it modifies the life from the people that live there, but only for 2 or 3 days. It's really it's contrasting, and it could be a good case of study for your next book of cultsense.
No, that's great. I mean, we often share Dia de los Muertos as part of, one of the local cultures, and how that day is lived. And it would be great to have a case study. But it's quite interesting, those phenomena, because they do, it's a bit of a de-eventification of culture, where culture and certain events also become important, not just for the locals, but they also get known. Of course, with media, social media, and also some films that I can remember, animation, the event got quite popular. So these days it's also like that. And again, there it's very important to understand what does that mean, and how are the relationships that might be different from when I visit that place. I don't have the same cultural references, so we should be open to understand, even if we don't agree, or if we don't really understand 100%, but at least open to have a dialogue about different practices, different beliefs, and how we can do that. I mean, it's a beautiful event.
Yeah, you're right. Just it's about respect, right? So finally, you said before that maybe we can join some of your studies, like focus groups and surveys, but it is open to Latin America too, or just Europe? Like Mexican students can join?
Yes, for example, you can do it in your own university with a group of students. You can be part of it and use our tools. And sometimes, for example, just last week, on the 15th of February, we had a panel, a webinar with students where they came together to discuss mobilities. For example, our colleague Maria Engberg in Finland, her students organize more or less every year this space chat rooms where different students from different places come together. So it's also online. So it can be done. These exchanges also. So it is possible, and these tools are also, some of them are already available. Others will become available in the next couple of months or so. Also, we have a page, let's say, on the open science framework. So everything is open access. So all our materials.
Okay.
But yes,
great.
Please let me know.
Sure, I will. Well, thank you so much for all this good conversation, interesting topic. And finally, I like to thank you on behalf of Dr. Ilia Alvarado. She's the other doctor that coordinates this Seminario. A little bit about the Seminario quickly is just an effort we made to give voices to tourist researchers, but mainly female tourist researchers, and that are related with the topics of space, like geographic points of view, culture, and tourism too. So we are very happy and proud that Lénia Marquez was today with us and was like the first talk in this year for the Seminario. And we thank also all the people that were in social media and YouTube and Facebook. That's all for today. Thank you, Lénia.
Muchas gracias. Thank you.